podcast is on stress reduction techniques. Actually, it only covers a few stress reduction techniques, but they are helpful and fairly easy to do. I think we've already established the connection between stress and health and the mechanism where that happens, whereby the stress response affects the immune system and affects body health through the endocrine system and the brain stem and the autonomic nervous system. So now one of the questions that comes up is, okay, is there anything that we can do? We know we are exposed to a lot of stress. We live in a high-stress society. Is there anything that we can do to moderate stress? Well, yes, there is, and let's take a look at some of those things. Albert Ellis is a psychiatrist who invented a school of therapy called rational emotive therapy. It's kind of a subset of cognitive behavioral therapy. And Ellis has some ideas that will help us with the question of dealing with stress. Ellis has a little kind of an algebraic equation, A plus B equals C, that applies to such things as stress and the stress response. A, in Ellis's equation, is the activating event. That's the actual stressor itself, the event, the person, the experience that produces the stress in our lives. B is our beliefs about the event. That's the part of it that goes on between our ears in our brains as we think a certain way about what has happened. And then C is the consequences of A plus B interacting. And in other words, how stressed do we feel? What happens? How high does our blood pressure actually go? And what kind of effect does stress have on our allostatic load? So let's take a look at how Ellis suggests this might work as a stress reduction program. First of all, you could change the A. That is to say, you can change the activating event. If dropping out of airplanes in a parachute stresses you out, don't do that anymore. If you're afraid of dogs, stay away from dogs. If going to the grocery store and shopping stresses you out, makes you anxious, then don't go to the grocery store. Actually, you can see from that last experience that it often isn't possible to change the activating event. There are lots of times when it is neither possible nor desirable to avoid the event that creates the stress. Somebody has to go to the grocery store. Now, there are people, of course, who are so severely stressed out with things like agoraphobia that they stay in their homes for 20 years, afraid to go out of doors because they're afraid that they'll have a panic attack, a phobic response to some activating event. But most people do recognize that they can change some of the activating events in their lives. For example, I've decided that watching the evening news before I go to bed is not a good thing to do. It stresses me out. It increases my stress level. It makes me anxious and it makes me angry. And it's not a good way to go to bed. So don't watch the evening news if that's your problem. Or don't listen to the news at all. I mean, after all, what difference does it really make anyway? If you are riding in the car and the talk radio show is stressing you out, don't listen to it. Maybe you want to switch to a channel that has some more quiet and soothing music that produces a better response in your autonomic nervous system than whatever it is that you happen to be listening to. Maybe the television stresses you out. Get rid of it. Who needs a television? Your health is worth a whole lot more than the entertainment value that comes from a television, so pitch it and get rid of that activating event and relieve some of the stress in your life. Maybe there are people in your life that you find stressful. Make some new friends. You don't have to be with those people if they're not good for you. If they bring you down, if they increase your stress load, make some new friends. Now, one thing that we probably ought to say is that this is one of the least mature ways of handling stress because it means that your coping mechanisms are not working very well, and so you're down with some very low-level coping mechanisms like avoidance. But there are a number of places where we would be smart to just change the activating event and relieve that stress in our lives. Another way to handle stress is to change the B, that is to say what we believe about the activating event. What we believe about something determines what effect it has on us. For example, somebody laughs at something you do or something you say. How will you react to that? Well, one possible reaction is, I'm an idiot. What did I do? Everybody makes fun of me. Nobody likes me. No one will ever like me. I'm just a klutz. Everybody's always laughing at me. Another way of responding to that would be to say, hey, I'm clever. Everybody likes me. I am the life of the party. There are two entirely different sets of beliefs about the same activating event. And this is the place where cognitive behavioral therapy spends a lot of time in something called cognitive reframing, teaching people that just because they always put that particular label on some experience doesn't mean that they have to keep doing it. They could, if they wanted to, put a different label on it. And so cognitive behavioral therapy, and here rational emotive therapy, is trying to teach people to be conscious of their beliefs about certain stimulating events and to try and decide whether it has to be that way or whether it could be some other way. If you can change your beliefs about something, then you can change your response to it. For example, you don't get a very good grade on a paper. You can say, I'm just a dummy. I'll never amount to anything. I'll never be able to graduate. Or you can say, okay, let me see if I can learn what I did wrong so I can figure out what to do right next time. I can learn from this. I'm smart. I'm a good student. I can figure this out. I can succeed at this. This is just feedback to help me know a better way. All right, go on to the next one. We can change the C, the consequences that come from the activating event plus our beliefs about the activating event. This is where we get into mitigating the consequences of stress, and this is the place where the classic stress reduction techniques come into their own. Things like exercise, for example. Exercise is a fantastic way to reduce stress. It turns out that when you exercise, you actually burn up some of those stress hormones, and it elevates your mood. It makes you feel like you're doing something good for yourself, and gives you a different way of looking at things. People have found that when they go through stressful experiences, exercise can quite literally save their lives. Another way of dealing with stress is to increase your oxygen intake. Slow, deep breaths that expand your lungs and bathe every body cell in more oxygen than it's seen in months is also a good way to reduce stress. Many people just don't breathe right. We breathe shallowly and we breathe partially. We never completely fill our lungs. And if we would just pay attention to how we breathe, we would experience stress reduction just in that alone. Meditation has been shown to mitigate the consequences of stress. If you can get in a quiet place and you can just sit quietly and you can tune out all the distractions and you can just relax, concentrate on your breathing, perhaps concentrate on some prayer to God or some word from God to you, and just focus and become fully mindful of what you're doing at that moment and not distracted by all the other things, you can mitigate the effects of stress. And especially if you couple this with deliberate muscular relaxation, where you start, say, at your toes and you clench your toes and then you relax them and you allow those muscles to release, and then you work your way up into your feet and your ankles and your lower legs and your knees and all the way up your body, just tensing and relaxing those muscles and becoming conscious of what it feels like when muscles are relaxed, and trying to achieve muscular relaxation all over your body, a sense of being warm and heavy and at rest. These are all ways to change the C, the consequences. There are times when we can't change the activating event. There are times when there doesn't seem to be any other way to change what we believe about the activating event. There are times when we're just stressed. Maybe we don't even know why. Oftentimes, I think, depending on the kind of person you are, you may not know why you're stressed. You may not even know that you are stressed until suddenly it shows up somehow. But if you make a regular practice of stress reduction techniques like these, then you can mitigate the effects of stress on your body, even if you're not fully aware of what it is that you're stressed about. Herbert Benson, the Harvard cardiologist, pioneered this area of relaxation response with his first book, The Relaxation Response, followed up with a second book, Beyond the Relaxation Response, because he was looking for a way to help his cardiac patients to avoid having another heart attack. And so he taught them how to relax. And he did it with a combination of deep breathing, meditation, and deliberate muscular relaxation. He found that this was effective in preventing heart attacks and lowering blood pressure and lowering heart rate and instilling a sense of well-being in his patients. The University of Massachusetts runs a mindfulness stress reduction clinic that has been in operation for about 19 years now, headed by Jon Kabat-Zinn. Kabat-Zinn's first book, Wherever You Go, There You Are, was followed up by his second book, Full Catastrophe Living. And in between, he found time to record some tapes called Mindfulness for Beginners. Mindfulness stress reduction tries to help people to experience a state of peace, a calming, a lowering of their stress hormones by being mindful of what it is that they're doing at the time that they're doing it. It's a kind of meditation that focuses the mind. And they have found that this has been very effective with cancer patients and with other people who are experiencing real health challenges, as well as people who experience mental health challenges like anxiety, depression, phobic responses, and things like that. Another way of mitigating the consequences of stress is to pay attention to margins in our lives. Richard Swenson wrote a book some years ago called Margin, and followed it up with another book called The Overload Syndrome. Swenson, an MD who teaches in a medical school, recognized that a lot of the stress that people experience in their lives is due to the fact that they're simply filling their lives too full. They're not leaving any margin of time, they're not leaving any margin for finances. They spend every dollar that they've got and more besides. They book themselves so that they're running from one appointment to the next. They never have enough time. If anything goes wrong, then they're late for appointments and they're overstressed. They can't afford to have anything go wrong in their lives because everything is predicated on everything going smoothly because they have spread themselves so thin that they've got no margin left at all. So Swenson talks about how in our society we have become workaholics and production specialists, and we seem to think that being busy is a good thing. And it's not a good thing because it isn't good for our spirits. It isn't good for our bodies either. So Swenson suggests ways of recognizing where we are up to our limits and deliberately creating margins in our lives. Largely, this is a matter of setting priorities. Stephen R. Covey, in his book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, says don't prioritize your schedule, schedule your priorities. And this becomes the key to his writing about what it is that people need to do in order to experience more effectiveness in their lives. Effectiveness really translates into happiness. It's not so much about being productive as it is about living a fulfilled life, rather than just a filled-up life. This is the place where religion and spirituality can really help us. First of all, by helping us choose good values, then by helping us to properly prioritize those values, and helping us to defeat negative self-talk, to forgive ourselves, and to rise above everyday life. In all of those ways, religion, spirituality is an enormous help in dealing with stress. By helping us deal with stress, religion and spirituality then exercises an enormous positive influence for health, so that the studies do show that people who practice their religion, who practice their spirituality, are people who have better mental health and better physical health. They have less disease, they recover more quickly, they live longer, and all of these probably have something to do with effective ways of dealing with a stress response. I'm not suggesting here that we pursue religion or spirituality because of the health benefits it produces. That would be selfish, and it would actually be a misuse of what God designed spirituality and religion to be. We should pursue religion and spirituality because it's the right thing to do, because we want to know God and we want to experience His presence and we want to honor Him and please Him and obey Him. But we also recognize that the benefits that we get are byproducts that come to us when we do the right thing. That God has designed the universe in such a way that when we do the wrong thing, we pay for it in one way or another. And when we do the right thing, we get rewarded in one way or another. That's simply because God has designed us to be certain kinds of people living in a certain kind of world. And when we violate that, it has negative consequences for our health, physical health, mental health, social health, and all other kinds of ways. Jesus, of course, knew this, and long ago he said, "What shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what shall he give in exchange for his soul?" Jesus had properly prioritized his life. He knew what was important and what wasn't. He knew what he would die for. Therefore, he had something significant to live for. And Jesus tells us that we need to recognize what is really important and not spend our lives working for something that when it's all said and done, we'll discover wasn't really worth it after all. I'd like to see you take these concepts and some of the other concepts that we've been studying and that you've been reading about and build them into your weekly reflection papers, and also take them to the discussion forum and share any ideas that you might have with your classmates and kick those ideas around on the discussion forum.